Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are at the start of 2035. It has been a pretty eventful offseason for the Royals thus far. I think our heavy lifting at this point is certainly done. When you look at our pitching staff, we made a trade for Bryce Hillman, 30-year-old starter from the Pirates, who has 2 seasons left on his contract to bolster our rotation. We made a trade for Felipe Tejeda, pretty good closer in the last year of his contract. And then we have also signed Jose Garces, Jesus Bibbs, and Min Ho Choi as free agents to hopefully bolster our pitching staff, which took a lot of hits in players turning free agents this past offseason. As far as the day-to-day players, really no new additions. Jonathan Ojeda, our number one draft pick from last year, certainly in the mix to make the Major League roster this year, along with Mike McNeil, who was called up at the end of last season. And the interesting thing is we did pick up Javi Medina in the Rule 5 draft. You can see this is a player who's never been above A ball. So it's going to be incredibly hard for us to keep him on the Major League roster the entire year. But he's got potential to be a really good player, be a really good bat. And he's young, barely 22 years old. What we're thinking about potentially is that we keep him on the roster as our fifth outfielder instead of someone like Orlando Soto for the year. And then after Javi Medina has theoretically spent the whole year on the Major League roster, then if he hasn't completely developed, which it's hard to imagine he will, getting 100, 150, 200 at-bats at most this year, send him down to Double-A or something next year, and then hope that he can ultimately turn into a productive major leaguer. But certainly no guarantee that he's going to make the roster, but he was an interesting enough prospect in the Rule 5 draft that we decided to pick him up. So we're going to continue over the coming weeks adding some minor leaguers to our farm system. The other thing that we are going to do is we've got our scouting budget maxed out. Development is at the highest it's ever been in the 13 years we've been running the team. We're going to keep those there, but with $19 million for free agents and a pretty mediocre crop of free agents, we're actually going to bump our draft budget up to $18 million for this year. We probably won't end up spending that money, but what it will allow us to do is if there's one of these first round type talents that's just asking for an insane amount of money and drops to the second, third, fourth, fifth round, we'll have enough money put aside that we can potentially pick one of those players and actually get them signed in addition to signing all the rest of our draftees. Some people would suggest, don't put that money aside, just keep it here for free agents. And if you've got a pretty good relationship with your owner, a lot of times they'll let you go over. But in the situation we're in, I don't mind kind of putting it aside specifically for signing draft picks. If we don't spend that money, it'll end up just going back into our finances. And one of our goals to make management happy this year, or make ownership happy this year, is to end with a $23 million balance. So it will help us get there by just putting that money aside and ensuring that we can't spend it anywhere else if we don't find some high-priced draftees that we want to pay over slot. And I think at this point, going into the season with over $10 million is still going to be plenty of room for us to take on contracts, make some trades, and still potentially do more in free agency. And obviously, we've got till the start of spring training to change that. Honestly, the one thing that could cause me to change it potentially is if we are kind of cycling through our players and we find somebody, one of the younger guys that we want to sign to a long-term extension, and we need a little extra money for extensions, in that case I'll probably pull it back out of the draft budget just to ensure that we can get a player signed. But I don't really know if there's going to be any one of our young prospects who's interested in letting us buy out some arbitration years and some free agency years. We have been able to do that with several of our players over the past few years, notably Eddie Chivera, Angelo Velasquez, and Angelo Bolden most recently. But some of these other guys, whether it's Willie Flores, Tony Fonseca, Arrighetto Laziosi, and even, quite honestly, Alex Vasquez, those guys just haven't really been too willing to engage on long-term contracts. But definitely going to check in on all of them in the coming weeks. And taking a look through our young players and seeing who we might be able to sign to extensions, it's kind of interesting. Tony Fonseca, who's been our shortstop for the last 2 years, and Arrighetto Laziosi, who's been our starting second baseman for the last 2 years. Neither of them are interested in long-term extensions yet. But Willie Flores, who has kind of been the backup to both of them, never had more than 382 at-bats in a season. He's interested in an 8-year deal at $11 million plus a season, which for a guy who's still kind of not fully developed and also still a backup to both of those players and Bobby Witt Jr. is a lot of money. I think I'd be potentially interested in Laziosi or especially Fonseca for that kind of money, but don't know that I'm ready to hand it over to Willie Flores yet until he actually has a full-time job and a full-time position on our team. Alex Vasquez, who is an incredible hitter, as you can see, 5 full years into his career, 146 homers, 548 runs batted in, 309 batting average, 943 career OPS. Just a devastating offensive player for us, and he is willing to talk extension now, but he wants 9 years, averaging $27 million a year. I don't know that I want to lock him up for that long, and I don't know that I want to give him 3 player options. Even though he's a very mediocre defensive left fielder, and we want to be in a situation, if we keep him, where he can be a full-time DH. And even though we've got a lot of young talent coming up behind him at the same positions that he plays, which is corner, outfield, and first, and we've got Rich Alvarado, Victor Avelar, Mike McNeil, Ishmael Zavala, and others, including last year's number 1 draft pick Ojeda, who play those same positions. Vasquez is still just a special bat. There's definitely an argument to just move on from him, but the bat is just so darn special that I think I'm going to make him an offer of some sort. It might not be an offer that he'll accept, but I want this bat in our lineup, if at all possible, after this year. All right, Vasquez was looking for 9 years at an average of almost $27.5 million a year, with an opt-out after the 3rd year and player options in years 8 and 9. We're coming back to him with 7 years, no player options, actually a team option for the final season, and the average is $26 million a year. So 2 less years, about $1.5 million less average per season, and more optionality for the team, less optionality for the player. Let's see what he thinks. he's willing to think about it. The top number would be 28 million next season, and then that would decrease a little bit down to 25 million a year for the last 4 years of the deal, which would take him into his mid 30s. I know there's definitely an argument to move on from Vasquez after this season, and I've certainly thought about it myself with all the young talent we have coming up and the fact that he's not a great defensive player. But that bat is special, and if I can lock up that bat for significantly less than we've been paying Bobby Witt Jr., who is clearly a much better defensive player, but is not nearly the same kind of offensive player that Vasquez is, we're going to give it a shot. 7 years, $182 million, so a massive contract for the Royals to Alex Vasquez. And we've signed Alex Vasquez to that massive extension. Fans are excited about it. Obviously, we don't have much money for free agents, and we've got very little money for extensions now. Because you can see next year we're going to have Witt at 37 and Alex Vasquez at 28. The only positive thing is that those numbers do decline a bit over time for Vasquez and more significantly over time for Bobby Witt Jr. But we've definitely cut our flexibility for the next few years. But I think we've also entrenched one of the best young bats in baseball right into the middle of our lineup for the foreseeable future. So I don't love the fact that he's a miserable glove. But that bat, I can't say no to it. The other guy that I'd like to try to make an extension offer to is the brilliant shortstop Tony Fonseca. If he hits the way that he's hit these last couple years, 261 and 282 in his first 2 full seasons in the majors, with this glove that he's developed, he's an incredibly valuable player, especially given that he's durable and he's been out there for over 150 games each year. He's not looking for a long-term deal. His ARB numbers the next couple years are a little over 4, 7, and 9. I think those are likely to go up. So we'll see if we can structure something that gives him a little more money in the next few years and then buys out some of those free agency years. So I think it's unlikely that Fonseca will go for this. We're offering him an 8-year extension at an average of $9 million a year, 5, 7, and 9 for the next 3 years, then $10 million a year for 4 years, and then an $11 million team option for the 8th season. I think he's definitely worth more than this on the open market. Basically just trying to find out if there's any chance at all of talking extension with him or not. Yeah, and he doesn't want to be tied up that long right now, so we'll just move on and keep continuing on with the off-season. Clearly getting Vasquez locked up for the long term is hopefully positive. It's clearly something we wanted to do since we did it, but that's probably going to be it as far as the big deals as we head closer to spring training. And here in late January, some of our former pitchers have started signing with other people. Longtime pitcher Mackenzie Gore signs with the Dodgers, and Matt Allen, who we picked up and was our closer last year, also signs with the Dodgers. Interesting. Huge hits to fan interest from those two moving on. But we're still so far above 100 that going into the season with still 100 in fan interest. So, we've got a few other pitchers who will potentially be losing, but at this point, we've got a lot of goodwill built up with a lot of big contracts that we've signed people to and traded for over the past several months. And the Royals have made it to the start of spring training. You can see still have some decent money for free agents, but the big scouting and development budgets are locked in, and the big draft budget is locked in at this point too. So I'm going to be investing a lot in our farm system and player development this year. Hopefully it will continue to develop and enhance and find players that can help us at the major league level. System ranks 21st right now overall, so certainly the opportunity for the big investments we're making to hopefully improve things and improve things relatively significantly and relatively rapidly over the next year or so. And we made it to the end of spring training on March 26th. A few minorish injuries here and there, nothing critical. Rich Alvarado banged up for 2 weeks with a strained Achilles right now, moderate impact on his running. So that's not optimal. Probably in the interest of being cautious, we'll put him on the IL, or there is a chance that he actually just gets sent down this year with the fact that Jonathan Ojeda is potentially going to be taking his spot at first base. So we've got some cuts to think about before we think about who's going on the IL. Still have 18 pitchers in camp and 17 position players, so we're going to have to cut both of those numbers down to 13. So a lot of decisions to make over the next few hours. And we've cut the pitching staff down to 13. No real surprises. Ben Borgman, Caleb Lagerwell, Bryce Hillman, Eddie Chavera, and Tyler Bosma are in the starting rotation. New acquisition Felipe Tejada is going to close. Jose Garces, another new acquisition, is our setup man. And then two of our top middle relievers, Jesus Bibbs and Minhoo Choi, are also players we picked up as free agents this offseason. So a really completely reworked top of the bullpen for the Royals. Dylan Carter, 33-year-old, been in Omaha for the last 3 years, going to finally get a shot. He's kind of the last man to make the team. Gordon Graceffo in the final year of his contract. His stuff is kind of garbage at this point. Hopefully he can still be productive coming out of the bullpen for us. And then Bryce Hubbard and Bob Williams are going to be our long relievers. So that is the pitching rotation or the starting rotation and the rest of the pitching staff. Looking at the lineups, we're down to 14 players, have one cut left to make. And we did end up being extra cautious in putting Rich Alvarado on the 10-day injured list. So that means that Billy Dominguez is going to make the roster at least for the first week or two of the season as a utility infielder. And Jonathan Ojeda, who was our number one pick last season, is going to move right into the majors as our starting first baseman. So the cut, we have three choices. Javi Medina, who we picked up in the Rule 5 draft, certainly profiles as someone who, if he is able to completely develop, could be a very interesting offensive player. He's never played above A ball, only 22 years old. He would be a backup outfielder if we try to keep him through this season. He's probably not as good as the two people he's competing with, one of which is Mike McNeil, who had a brilliant year for us with a .348 batting average and 27 homers in AAA last year. Former number one draft pick of ours back in 2032. He profiles as hopefully a bit above average as an offensive player. Still can kind of improve his home run power. McNeil was definitely penciled in as a starter this year, but he's been battling for a playing time and now ultimately for a roster spot with Rodolfo Falcone, who we picked up in a trade with Arizona last December. That was the trade where we got rid of Rivas, who was the young outfielder we had picked up from the Yankees and Josiah Simpson. And Tejada was obviously the main one we picked up in that trade to be our closer for a year. But we did bring in Falcone and thought he could be interesting. And he had a not quite as many homers as McNeil last year, but a .344 batting average in AAA with 10 homers. And he's pretty much fully developed at this point at 24 years of age. And as I mentioned, he's been getting more of the starting time than McNeil. So I have a hard time deciding what to do. I think Falcone is going to be up. The question is whether we keep McNeil or Javi Medina. And I like Medina's potential. So we are actually going to send Mike McNeil back down to AAA. The guy's got to be wondering what he needs to do since he hit .348 down there last year. He did struggle when he was up at the majors, hitting just a .175 when he was up at the end of last year. I think he still potentially has a big future role on our team. Hopefully he can improve his home run power down there, get that last notch that he needs. But really, I just don't think that McNeil's going to get enough playing time because he's going to be behind Falcone when he's up here. So I'd rather have him in the lineup every day. So we're going to demote him to Omaha. And then Medina is going to be our fifth outfielder. Hopefully, he's not going to get a ton of playing time, but hopefully getting some attention from our excellent major league coaches will help him continue to develop, and we'll see whether we can keep him on the roster for the whole year or whether we'll ultimately have to send him back to Cincinnati. And before we finish off this spring training episode, now that we have pared the Major League roster down to 26 days, we will run a preseason prediction and see what it has to say for our Royals. Still a few days till the regular season starts, so the opportunity for things to change is out there. But predicting 100 wins for us, which would be the best record in the American League. Predicting good offensive seasons from Vasquez and actually Ojeda, the rookie, which would be wonderful. And thinks that Ben Borgman is going to have another very good year as a pitcher for us. And also thinks that Chivera and Hillman, two of the receivers that we've added recently, are going to have big years for us also. So would be great if that comes true. It looks like the prediction is that we'll have the best record in baseball. So we will start finding out our progress towards that in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.